Hello, fellow game devs. Welcome, and thank you for coming and joining us here today in our talk about unlocking the latest from the Microsoft gaming ecosystem, or the Microsoft gaming platforms. We're excited to share with you all the things that are new and things that you can take advantage of right now when developing for the Microsoft gaming platforms using Unity. I'm Abdullah Hamed. I'm originally from Saudi Arabia. But I'm based in Seattle, and I'm the product manager for the Microsoft platforms at Unity, and I use he, they pronouns. And I'm joined today with my colleague, Alexandru, who is the manager of software engineering for the Microsoft platforms here at Unity.
Hi, everyone.
Today, we're going to talk about these topics. What is the Microsoft gaming ecosystem? What is the Game Development Kit, or GDK? What is new at Unity regarding the GDK? Then we're going to talk a little bit about how to get started with development for the Microsoft platforms using the GDK. Then Alexandru will show you some demos, and we're going to end everything with some Q&A. Does that sound good? Great. Perfect. Love it. All right. So what is the Microsoft gaming ecosystem? The first thing that makes up the Microsoft gaming ecosystem are the platforms, the gaming platforms. You can think of those as the endpoints where players actually play the games. Windows is an open platform with a lot of different stores, but Microsoft has their own ecosystem on there where players can buy games on the Xbox app and play them natively on their machines. There's also the Xbox consoles, of course, like the Xbox Series X and S, as well as the Xbox One, which is still supported until today. Games on the Microsoft platforms can give players access to cross-identity, cross-saves, cross-achievements, and many different features. What enables these cool features is the Xbox Network. It's a suite of services and APIs that enable developers to create these cool scenarios that we just talked about. Then there's DirectX, a powerful graphics API that is available on the Microsoft platforms. So how do you develop for the Microsoft gaming platforms? Well, you use the GDK. The GDK contains common tools and libraries and documentation needed to develop and debug your games on Windows 10 and 11 and the Xbox consoles within the Microsoft ecosystem. This includes the APIs for the Xbox Network that we talked about earlier. So how big is the Microsoft gaming ecosystem? Microsoft has a different and unique future for gaming, a future where every screen is an Xbox. We saw this materialize with Xbox Cloud Gaming Beta on phones, tablets, and smart devices. Not counting Windows machines or phones or Xbox consoles, there are millions and billions of smart TVs out there that could be part of the Microsoft gaming ecosystem through Xbox Cloud Gaming. So what is new for the GDK within Unity? Previously, if you wanted to develop using the GDK for Windows, there was a package called the GDK package PC only on GitHub, and that was maintained by Microsoft. There was another package for Xbox called Game Core package, and that was maintained by Unity. That process was full of friction. These two packages access the Xbox Network very differently. And there was a lack of relative samples and demos that showcased how to use these two different APIs together within one project. And because of that, the GDK Unity package PC only will be deprecated in December 31st. And the Game Core package has already been deprecated. We replaced that experience with partnership with Microsoft by creating 3 packages that combine the workflow to access the Xbox Network between PC and Xbox. 2 of these packages can be accessed through the package manager right now. There is the Microsoft GDK API package, which is just a wrapper around the C# the C# code that Microsoft developed in the GDK. And the GDK tools package offers UI tools to aid you in development within Unity. The GDK API package is technically optional, but it's highly recommended that you install it and use it in conjunction with the GDK API package. The last package is the GDK tools for Xbox, and that is only available for approved Xbox developers. These packages are available in Unity 6, 22 LTS, as well as the 21 LTS versions of Unity. With the tools package, you can now edit the Microsoft game.config file within the editor. And that enables scenarios where you want to edit it through C#, want to edit it through build scripts, or even the new build profiles in Unity 6. So how do you get started with development on the Microsoft gaming platforms? To get started on all Microsoft platforms, you need to get access to Microsoft Partner Center. As an indie, you get access through it by joining Addy at Xbox. But with Windows, you don't need to wait until you get access to Partner Center. You can start installing Unity right now. Install the GDK from Microsoft's GitHub. There's a public GDK for PC. And you can install the GDK API package and the Microsoft the GDK tools package from the package manager right now. It's available for you. And then you can check out the samples and documentation and everything that's available within the package. As well, check out the documentation for the GDK from Windows, from Microsoft directly. To get started with Xbox consoles, you also need access to Partner Center through ID at Xbox if you're an indie. And through the same process, once you get access to the ID at Xbox program, you'll get access to Unity discussions that is dedicated for Xbox development. It was previously called Unity Forums. You'll need to install Unity, but you need to at least have a Pro license. To provide you with the best experience possible on those closed platforms, Unity Pro is required for all consoles. You'll need to install the GDK for Xbox from Microsoft Xbox development download page. Then you should install the platform add-ons for Xbox Series X and S, or Xbox One if you're targeting these platforms. Install the two packages the same as Windows. Install the GDK API package and the Microsoft GDK tools. But you'll also need to install one more package, which is the Microsoft GDK tools for Xbox that is available on the Unity discussions page for Xbox. And now I'm going to hand it over to Alexandru, where he can show us some demos on how to use the GDK packages.
Thank you, Abdullah. Hi, everyone. I'm Alexandru Marian, and I lead the Microsoft OS platform team at Unity, where we look after how the Unity engine runtime works on Windows and Xbox. Today, we'll have a look at how the new Microsoft GDK packages make it easier to integrate your projects with the Xbox network and take full advantage of Microsoft's gaming ecosystem. What I'll focus on today are the extra configuration information that you will need to add to your Unity projects compared to like a non-GDK Windows standalone project. And also some of the APIs, the GDK APIs that you'll need to call from your game scripts to start interfacing with the Xbox network. I'll focus on GDK on Windows during this live demo. So also keep your fingers crossed that everything goes okay. But keep in mind that everything that I'll show you applies to Xbox as well. So by adding the Microsoft GDK packages, to your project, setting all the configuration that's necessary, and starting to call the GDK APIs, you'll be that much closer to being able to also publish on the Xbox consoles. With the caveat, of course, that, as Abdullah mentioned earlier, you will need Unity Pro and approval from Microsoft to publish on those platforms. And of course, my laptop decides to... So on my machine, I have my Windows setup. And for this live demo, I'll use Unity 6 Preview. But as we mentioned before, we support 2022 LTS and 2021 LTS as well. And as Abdullah mentioned, there are some software requirements for developing on Microsoft GDK. The most important of which is having the GDK itself, the game development kit, installed. And you can download it from Microsoft's GitHub page, which is this. For the purposes of this demo, I have the June 2024 version installed. I'm also going to use Visual Studio 2022 as my code editing tool for this live demo. But what I've done here is just created an empty Unity project, and I've added the Microsoft GDK packages from the package manager. So we have the Microsoft GDK API, as Abdullah mentioned. This provides like some wrappers to access the GDK APIs from your C# scripts. And then the Microsoft GDK tools package, which adds workflow integration for building your project targeting the GDK. So what the tools package, we'll start with that. What it adds is a new tab in your project settings page for the Microsoft GDK. And we'll come back to this one in a second. And a new menu item here at the top, which contains a link to the developer portal documentation for GDK, which is this. This is the public Microsoft documentation for the GDK, as well as a tool for switching the sandbox, which, again, I'll come back to in a second during the demo. The other thing that the GDK tools package adds is a new type of asset called a GDK settings asset, which contains some information that Unity needs to generate the build of your project that integrates with the GDK. As any sort of type of asset in Unity, you could just create it from the right-click menu. So there's a new GDK section here at the bottom, so you can create a GDK settings asset there. You can have multiple of these in your project, and you can make one active at any given time. You can do it either from the UI or from editor scripts, so you can integrate this into any custom kind of build pipeline tooling that you've created. However, for the purposes of this live demo, we will go back here to the Microsoft GDK API package, and it contains a bunch of samples, and we're going to use one of them to date as a starting point. So I'm going to import the user sample. This is like a basic demo that shows you how to use the user's API to kind of collect information about the user that's logged in. So I'm going to go ahead and import that. Close this off. And the user's sample comes with its own GDK settings asset. And hopefully this won't take too long. OK, so now I can make this as the active setting for my project from this GDK menu option here. Oops, select Make GDK Settings Asset. And what this does now, it populates the Microsoft GDK tab here in the project settings. You'll see there's a checkbox here to build for the Microsoft GDK. So enabling this means that when I build now, Unity will kind of copy any DLLs that are necessary and set everything up so the build is a correctly formatted one for like running your title with the Microsoft GDK. One important part of the settings asset is the Microsoft Game Config, and you can think of this as a manifest for your project. The sample asset comes with a Microsoft Game Config already added in here. Oops, and you can inspect this either using the Microsoft Game Config editor, which I've just opened up here. This is a tool included in the GDK. Where you can see all the information that the Microsoft Game Config file contains. What it does, like one of the most important pieces of information it does contain is some IDs that kind of are unique to your title and identify it on the Xbox network. These you will be able to access once you join the ID at Xbox program, or like through your publisher if you have that, once you get access to the Microsoft Partner Center. The Microsoft Partner Center acts as kind of like the back-end configuration service for the Xbox network for your title. And there you can set up metadata, like title capabilities, kind of store information, pricing, but also game configuration. So that's where you would set up all of the achievements that your game kind of offers, for example. Obviously, it's not a Unity-owned service. It's owned by Microsoft, so it's best to check the Microsoft documentation for the latest info and requirements and kind of how to use the Microsoft Partner Center to set everything up. But once you've set your title correctly there on the back end, you associate your Microsoft game config with that setup using this button associated with Microsoft Store. However, for this demo, this game config already kind of contains the correct sample ID, so we'll go ahead and use this. There are other settings here that you can add. So for example, for PC, you can set up a custom installer for kind of any prerequisite that your game needs to run. That's all sorts of other settings. I won't go into these today. You can check out the Microsoft documentation for more information on them. And there's obviously Xbox-specific settings as well that you can use once you're an approved Xbox developer. So I'll close this for now because we don't need to edit anything for this demo. There is an inspector in the editor as well for the Microsoft game config. It will show up some of the information, and it also contains a little validator just to warn you if there's like something super important, or like give you errors if there's something important that you haven't set up there, just so you don't have problems later on when you try to do a build. But you can also edit all of this information through editor scripts. So there are some C# APIs that we've added in the Microsoft GDK tools package that allows you to access all the information in the Microsoft game config from your editor C# scripts. So there's a GDK settings class, and that lets you get the active game config for your build target. So you can have these separate as well. You can have a game config for PC and a separate one for Xbox if you want to have kind of like slightly different settings and things. The last thing I'll touch on quickly before I run the project is the concept of a sandbox. So the Xbox network is a unified environment for both production and development. That's where kind of all the production titles available on Xbox are. And that's where gamers actually go to purchase them and play them. But it also contains a virtual environments for developers to use while they're developing their titles. These are called sandboxes. You can think of them as like kind of private instances of the Xbox network. You will get access to your own sandboxes once you join the program. And you can use these to kind of run your game in a controlled environment that only you have access to. Because the sample isn't like a published sample on the store or anything, I'm going to have to change the sandbox that I use. For this live demo, I'm going to use the XDKS sandbox, so I'm going to switch to that. I'll get a little dialog, and we're going to wait for this to finish up. So we've successfully switched to the sandbox, and now we are good to go. So I'm just going to load up the scene and then build and run. And again, hopefully this won't take too long. Okay, so what the sample does is very basic. Once you click the login button, it's going to check if there's a user logged in, an Xbox user logged in. And then it's going to grab some information about that user. It's going to display their gamer tag, also their profile picture, and a few other bits of information. So let's have a quick look at how that is done in the scripts. So first, I'm going to have a look at this GDK game runtime script. And what this does is just the code like needed to initialize the services. So you will need to, before kind of accessing any APIs, you will need to initialize the game runtime. By the way, all the APIs are contained within this namespace, the Unity X Gaming Runtime namespace. And then kind of switching back to the code. Sorry, of course, when I do the demo, I kind of lose track of where everything is. And I just had it a second ago as well.
This happens to me every time I open Visual Studio. That's why
Okay, there we go.
That's why you're the engineering manager.
So we have an initialize gaming runtime function. You need to call this xgame runtime initialize before kind of accessing any other APIs. Obviously, hopefully that works out okay. So for that point forward, we can use the APIs. The other thing that you'll have to do is kind of set up your task queues for all the async operations. So a lot of the APIs in the GDK are asynchronous. And you can control how these are run. You can set up task queues to kind of send those async jobs to them, and you can control how they are run within your game. But for this sample, we've added a kind of easier way to instantiate that. So I've added this create default task queue API, which will create a task queue for you. And then kind of any asynchronous operations are sent straight to that. The only thing that you will have to do somewhere in your game scripts is called xtaskQueue dispatch. So what the sample does is starts a coroutine that in a while loop kind of calls that periodically. And once that is done, you're good to go. So then the sample kind of goes on to add the logged in Xbox user to the game. So this is done in this add default user silently function. We call the X user add async API from the GDK with this add default user silently flag. So what this will try and do is like see if there's a user already logged in on the machine, an Xbox user, and then it will not kind of display any dialogues or anything for the user. It will just add it to the game directly. It's going to go and check that there aren't any kind of permission issues that need to be resolved before the game can proceed. And assuming everything goes okay, it will continue with that user. If there isn't a default user kind of logged in on the machine already, it will go and do that again, but it will no longer pass that add user silently flag. So this will actually open up a login dialog and make the user log in with their account. There's some extra code here to kind of handle different error cases. But essentially, once we've successfully added the user, now we can get some information about them. So there's a xuser get gamer tag API in the GDK that obviously just lets you get the gamer tag. You can get their local ID. We can get their gamer picture as a byte array buffer, and then we can turn that into a texture and display in the UI. And then, yeah, all sorts of other information that we can get if they've muted anyone, if they've kind of selected to avoid any other players for whatever reason, etc. Cool, so that's everything with this particular sample. I'll load up another sample to show you how to do game saves as well using the Microsoft GDK APIs. So we have a game save sample here, which I'll go ahead and import. Now, one of the requirements on using the Microsoft GDK is that any user game saves are synced to the cloud. so that the user can access those game saves anywhere they play. And for this, there are kind of several ways to do this, but the sample shows you how to use the XGameSave API to do this. Now, this API kind of takes away some of the, like it no longer lets you kind of use files written on the disk directly. Instead, it kind of uses a few different concepts, and it lets the system manage everything and how that data is written to the disk, but also how it's synced to the cloud, so it's available everywhere else. So the first bit of scripted I'll have a look with you at is this. There's an initialize function here, so we need to call xgamesave initialize provider async. We pass in the handle to the user that's actually saving their game or is going to access the saved data. And this, which is called the service configuration ID, this is another ID that you can get from Partner Center, as I mentioned before, once your game is all set up. And this will give you access to the storage space for the user. So each title kind of gets space on the machine allocated for saving game save information. And once you call this, the API is ready to go, and you have access to that storage space. The next kind of concept using this API is the concept of a container. And you can think this is an equivalent to a folder in a traditional file system. The containers have names. And before we access any actual data, we kind of need to open one of these containers. So we have this get or create container function in the sample. But what it does is it calls the xgamesave create container API from the GDK. And then you pass in the name of the container that you want to access, and it will give you a handle to that container. And once we have that, we're ready to either read information or save information in there. So to save, excuse me, to save information, you can use, you'll have to kind of create an update batch. So you call the xgamesave create update, where you pass in the container handle. And then you kind of can batch in changes to blobs. Now, blobs are what are contained within the container. You can think of them as files in a traditional kind of file system jargon. And they just contain binary information, just whatever you need to save to kind of save you the information required in your game. They have a name as well. And once you've created the update there, you can use that update handle to batch in a bunch of changes to like the different blobs that you want to save in there, providing their name and then the information that you want to write as a binary byte array. Once you've added all the changes that you want, you can submit the update. And from this point on, the operating system will kind of take over and do all of these changes as a atomic operation. So we will both write them to the disk on the local machine, but also sync them to the cloud for you. Loading the game is also easy. You will open the container just as before, and then you will read the blob data. You can read multiple blobs at the same time, so you can pass in an array of blob names, and then you will get like a corresponding array of the blob binary information as well that you can then parse in your game scripts. There are other things that you can do. You can query how much space there's left and the user storage space for your title. And you can actually query all the containers and all the blobs that are in there as well, in case you need to do that. And I will also run this demo just to kind of show you what it does. So I'm going to open the scene. And what this sample does is kind of tries to simulate a game. So I can generate like a new character. This is the character that I'm playing right now. And we can generate certain events that happen to them. So, you know, they maybe they level up or they get some new equipment to use. And then at some point, the user will want to kind of save their game. So I'm going to initialize the save game provider, just as you saw in code. And then once that completes, hopefully. Let's generate a new character. Of course, something's gone wrong. Let's try again. There we go. Oh, it's because I'm clicking too fast. The user wasn't added yet. Sorry, everyone. I'm going to try one more time.
Are we using the right sandbox?
Yes, we are on the right sandbox, yeah. Yeah, I'm just going to wait a little bit more. Maybe it's the Wi-Fi here. Okay, what should have happened is that these buttons would have lit up and it would have allowed me to save the game and also kind of delete the container and everything. I'm not entirely sure why this isn't working, but I was going to stop here anyway. And then, yeah, I encourage you to kind of check both the samples that I've showed you today and all the other samples contained in the package, as well as our documentation, which kind of goes into more detail about how to use the GDK API. And with that, I'll hand it back to Abdullah to finish up the presentation.
All right. Thank you, Alexandru.
Thank you.
Just like Alexandru mentioned, please check the Microsoft GDK package documentation to how to set up the GDK package, how to install them, and even how there's a guide on how to migrate from previous GDK packages like the GameCore 1 to the new one. And also check out the Microsoft Game Development Kit's documentation, because since this, the API package is just a wrapper around the C# package, the C# GDK, C++ GDK, I mean. It's a C# wrapper around the C++ GDK. There's a lot more information on how these APIs work at Microsoft's documentation. Also, check out the Microsoft Partner Center documentation to how to set up achievements and all of that stuff on the cloud there. Yeah, check the documentation there. And I hope we gave you a clear introduction on how to use the GDK packages. What are the Microsoft gaming platforms? What is the Xbox network? And how to use the GDK packages. And we gave you enough demos, hopefully, today to get you started. Now we're going to open it up to Q&A. This QR code will lead you to a landing page to help you get started right away. So feel free to scan it and get started.